Order. I call the member for Ninderry.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. And I rise to support the original motion moved by the member for Kawana. And interesting to follow the police minister. He had 5 minutes on his feet to justify to all of us here and all the people of Caloundra and the Sunshine Coast why this is a good decision by the government. The minister likes to come in here and talk tough, like he did just then and like he did this morning. But we know in this House, and the people of Caloundra know, and the people of Queensland know, that actions speak louder than words, Mr Acting Speaker. And this government has a litany of dire amendments they've made to water down the Youth Justice Act in this state, which has ended in tears.
Deputy Speaker.
Pause the clock. Resume your seat. What's your point of order?
You've just made a very specific ruling about relevance, and the member's been going for almost a minute now and has not spoken at all about a specific facility, nor has he kept to the motion before the House, Deputy Speaker, and is talking about everything else.
Members to my left, I don't appreciate interjections while I'm trying to take and consider a relevant and a point of order. I will start to warn people if that occurs again. I've been listening to the contribution of the member. I'm giving some latitude to see if we are getting back to the tenet of the motion, as we generally tend to do in presiding over this House. So I'll continue to listen, but I would ask the member to stay relevant to the motion.
Mr Acting Speaker, thank you. And I return to the Youth Justice Act, which is an overarching act which police use every day when they detain offenders and put them in a youth justice facility, which takes me directly to that point we're going to be talking about today, about the youth jail in Caloundra. But we saw, talking about action speaking louder than words, we saw in 2015 one of the first bills tabled in this parliament by this government was a Youth Justice Amendment bill that blatantly watered down powers available to our police to protect the community from repeat violent young offenders. The objectives of that bill were, 1, to scrap the youth bail offence, 2, reinstate detention as a last resort as the overarching #1 principle in the Youth Justice Act. I don't know if I've told people in the parliament before, but I used to be a police officer.
Point of order.
No,
point of order.
I like to keep it on the
Deputy Speaker, point of order. I know that you were seeking some advice,
yes,
Deputy Speaker,
you.
But Deputy Speaker, if the amendment was relevant, then the member's contribution would be relevant. The member has not discussed anything about the facility.
Just resume your seat, please. Member for Toowoomba South, you're warned. I had previously instructed the House that I don't appreciate people interjecting while I'm trying to deal with and take a point of order.
So, Deputy Speaker, it's about relevance and consistency with your previous ruling about the amendment. If the amendment was still in order, Deputy Speaker, what the member for Ninderry would be saying would be entirely relevant. But given your ruling and what the member for Ninderry is saying now, it's entirely irrelevant.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Mr Deputy Speaker.
Member for Scenic Rim was on his feet first. So I'll take his point of order.
The member for Morayfield is clearly reflecting on the chair. I'd ask you to rule his point of order out of order.
There's no point of order. Member for Kawana.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, the amendment that you have ruled out of order had never been put to the House anyway, but that does not stop members from rebutting points made by other members in this debate, which has happened since the day this parliament opened. Members contribute to the debate, and then it is open an opportunity for other members to rebut certain points. Now, whether an amendment has been ruled out of order, that doesn't stop the fact of what the minister said in his contribution. So I put to you, Mr Deputy Speaker, in response to the minister's point of order, that the members are entitled in this House to rebut the points made by the minister.
Well, in response to both your points of order, I will listen to what the member has to say and make an appropriate ruling. We were taking some advice while that was going on, but I will just take some advice from the clerk. Well, the amendment was ruled out of order, as you've correctly pointed out. The minister's contribution was specifically to the amendment. so therefore it's not available for rebuttal. So I call the member for Ninderry to make your contribution relevant to the motion.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. And I was just about to say I like to keep it on the down low, but I was a detective, and I was a detective in Caloundra, Mr Acting Speaker, where this proposed youth jail is planned. And the minister just had 5 minutes to explain to us why that was a good idea, but he couldn't. He spent 4 minutes going through a document from 2013 where a department person recommended the watch house be converted to a youth jail. And you know what the difference was? Leadership. The boss at the time, the member from Kawana, said no. And that's why the police, up until recently, have still had a watch house at their disposal at Caloundra. And, Mr Speaker, I'm talking directly about the failures of this government, which has led to the requirement for a youth jail in Caloundra. Because the next step on their litany of failures, which you go back and look at now, and it's like watching an episode of Seconds from Disaster. In 2016, another Youth Justice Amendment Act moved 17-year-olds into the Youth Justice Act, essentially moving all 17-year-olds who are held in prison into youth detention facilities. But at that time, Mr Acting Speaker, I can tell you youth detention facilities were already at capacity. I was on the front line at the time, and we questioned that decision. I believe it was the president of the police union, Ian Levers, came out at that time and said more planning goes into building a local McDonald's than went into that decision. Fast forward a couple of years, in May 2019, there's an expose on Four Corners which revealed 90 kids being held in police watch houses, predominantly here at Brisbane. Exactly right. Fast forward a couple of months, August that year, still talking about kids in detention, Mr Acting Speaker, there was another bill tabled in this parliament to water down the Youth Justice Act. The title and the objective of the bill was to remove further barriers from young offenders getting bail. I said at the time, and I know all of my colleagues at the time warned the government, all this was doing was transferring the problem from youth justice back out onto the street. And we warned the government it was ending in tears, Mr Speaker, and it gives me no pleasure in saying it did. It did on a number of occasions. It did it on Australia Day, it did at Todai Kefu's house, and the list goes on, and heaven forbid. And now we have this minister turning up in here talking tough on crime. But it's a charade. It's an absolute charade, because the actions of this government, their overt soft on crime agenda, is louder than the words this minister's jumping up and down a bit. Which takes me to the point that the highest priority of any government is the safety and security of its citizens, and this government is failing in that highest priority. But not only that, this youth jail in Caloundra is an example of that. But not only that, it's a case study of how this government does business. Prior to the election, this minister stood up at Caloundra. He promised the people of Caloundra and the Caloundra Police a new police station and more police and more resources. And we now know from estimates that at that time he was talking to our police and the local community. He knew then a deal had been done. A deal had been done to deprive our local police of their watch house. And it was funny when the announcement came out, when the story broke.
Point of order.
Pause the clock. What's your point of order, Minister?
The statements are personally offensive and misleading and incorrect, and I ask for them to be withdrawn.
Order. Order. The member's taken personal offence and asked they be withdrawn. I ask you to withdraw.
I withdraw, Mr Acting Speaker.
I call the member for Ninderry.
But it was deceptive, Mr Acting Speaker. The government stood up, promised a new police station, and they knew.
Pause the clock. Resume your seat, please, member for Ninderry.
The statement's personally offensive and misleading and incorrect, and I ask for it to be withdrawn.
Minister, the statements can be personally offensive. If you find them misleading, there are other processes to follow in relation to that matter. Member for Ninderry, the members found the statements personally offensive. I ask you to withdraw. I call the member for Ninderry.
I withdraw, Mr Acting Speaker. And in summing up, Mr Acting Speaker, all I call for this police minister to show some leadership, like the former boss, the former AG, the member for Kawana did, and say no to this youth jail in Caloundra and give the police back their watch house.